The desert night stretched endlessly, silent except for the faint cry of a coyote far across the canyon. Two figures moved carefully through the dry sand, their footsteps barely whispering against the earth. They were sisters Apache, daughters of the desert, trapped in thin wool blankets that shielded them only slightly from the biting wind. Their names were Ioka and Nalin. Ioka, the elder, carried herself with quiet strength, her dark eyes fixed on the horizon. Nalin, the younger, still carried a softness in her spirit, though the hardships of the trail had already begun to carve lines of worry across her face. They had been traveling for 3 days with almost no rest. Their village had been raided by merciless ridersmen who came not for food or trade, but for cruelty. Their family was gone, scattered like leaves in a storm. All the two sisters had left was each other and the desert itself, vast and unforgiving. The moon above gave them silver light, enough to guide their path through the scrub and rock. Each cactus cast long, twisted shadows that seemed almost alive. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of mesquite. Every sound, the crack of a stone underfoot, the rustle of dry grass felt louder in the stillness. Nalin stumbled, her feet blistered from the endless miles. "Ioka," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I cannot walk much further. My body is tired, my spirit even more so." Ioka turned to her, gently steadying her sister with a firm hand. "Do not lose hope," she said softly. "The desert tests us, but it has always been our teacher. We will find shelter before the sun returns." But even as she spoke, Ioka knew the truth. Their path was uncertain. The nights were cold, and the days were blistering. Without fire, without water, survival was slipping away like sand through their fingers. Far off in the distance, a faint light flickered. At first, they thought it might be a trick of the eyes, some reflection of moonlight on rock. But as they pressed forward, the glow grew stronger, steadier. It was firelight, a beacon in the endless dark. The sisters' hearts lifted. Where there was fire, there was life. Perhaps safety, perhaps food, perhaps kindness. The two quickened their pace despite their weariness. Each step toward the light was a step away from despair. When at last they crested a low ridge, they saw it clearly, a small cabin nestled at the base of a rocky hill, its chimney breathing thin trails of smoke into the night. Horses stood tethered nearby, their silhouettes outlined by the flicker of the flames. Nalin's eyes widened. "A rancher," she breathed. "A white man's home." Ioka hesitated. The history between her people and the ranchers was heavy with distrust. Many settlers had taken Apache lands, treating the people as obstacles rather than neighbors. To approach this home was to step into uncertainty, perhaps even danger. But the night was too cold, and their bodies too weak to turn away. "We must try." Her voice was steady, though inside her heart trembled. "For tonight, we ask only for shelter." And so, together, the two sisters descended from the ridge, their figures small and weary against the vastness of the desert night, walking toward the fire that would soon change the course of their lives forever. The cabin stood like a lone sentinel against the wild frontier, its walls of rough-hewn timber marked by years of desert wind and dust. A lantern glowed faintly in the single window, its light spilling across the wooden porch where a pair of boots rested. Worn and heavy, the sisters approached cautiously, their steps slowing as they neared the circle of firelight. The smell of wood smoke mixed with the faint tang of leather and horse. The silence of the desert seemed to hush itself, as if holding its breath for what was about to unfold. Ioka raised her hand to knock, but before she could, the door creaked open. A tall figure stepped into the doorway, his shadow stretching long across the dirt. He was the rancher. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied the two women before him. His beard was thick, streaked with gray, and his hat sat low on his brow. His hand rested on the doorframe, but there was a tension in his stance, as if he could reach for the rifle, leaning just inside the cabin at any moment. "What do we have here?" His voice was rough, gravelly from years of smoke and whiskey. Ioka straightened her back, her voice calm despite the fear twisting inside her. "We are travelers," she said. "The desert is cruel tonight. We ask only for shelter until morning." The rancher's gaze flickered between them, weighing their words, measuring their worth. His eyes lingered longer on Nayland, whose tired frame trembled under the weight of exhaustion. "You're Apache," he said flatly, not as a question, but as a statement. His tone carried both suspicion and curiosity. Nayland lowered her head, but Ioka met his stare with quiet dignity. "Yes, we are daughters of this land. We mean no harm." The rancher leaned against the doorframe, the glow of the lantern catching the hard lines of his face. He was a man who had carved his life out of isolation, a man who had seen enough hardship to grow callous. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "I could give you shelter," he drawled, "but nothing comes for free out here, not in this country." Nayland's breath caught in her throat. She glanced at Ioka, confusion and fear flashing in her eyes. "We have nothing to trade," she whispered. The rancher's lips curved into a slow, cold smile. "There's one thing you can give," he said. "Stay the night as my wives, both of you. Do that, and the cabin is yours till dawn." The words hung heavy in the air, darker than the desert night itself. The fire crackled, but even its warmth could not cut through the chill that gripped the sisters' hearts. Nayland stepped back, her face pale beneath the shadows. "No, we cannot." Ioka gripped her sister's arm, silencing her with a gentle squeeze. Her mind raced. To refuse meant stepping back into the deadly desert with no food, no warmth, and no hope. To accept meant surrendering the last piece of their dignity. The rancher's eyes narrowed. "Choose quick," he muttered. "The night don't wait, and neither do I." Behind him, the cabin's firelight beckoned safety, warmth, the chance to survive another day. But the cost was steep, perhaps unbearable. The two sisters stood frozen, the desert wind whispering around them, carrying with it the weight of a choice that would forever alter the path of their lives. The cabin's doorway glowed like a fiery mouth, swallowing the sisters' courage with each passing second. Inside, the warmth of crackling logs and the smell of cooked meat promised safety. Outside, the cold desert winds pressed against their thin blankets, gnawing at their weary bones. The rancher leaned against the frame, unmoving, his gaze heavy with possession. His demand had been made clear, cruel, and final. Ioka's voice broke the silence first. "You ask much," she said, her tone even but edged with steel. "We are not women to be traded like cattle." The rancher chuckled, a low sound that echoed with arrogance. "Out here, everything's traded. Water, horses, bullets, and yes, even women. Survival's a game of bargains. You want warmth. You pay my price. Nalen's hands trembled at her sides. Her heart raced, pounding in her ears, louder than the desert wind. She could not meet the man's eyes. Instead, she stared at the ground, at the rough wood of the porch beneath her feet. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. We only ask for kindness, just for one night. Nothing more. For the briefest moment, a shadow crossed the rancher's face. Perhaps he remembered another time when he had once been desperate, when he too had sought shelter. But the hardness quickly returned. His jaw tightened, and he shrugged as though swatting away the flicker of conscience. Kindness don't keep a man alive, he muttered. I live alone, fight off thieves, break wild horses, and face this land every damn day. You think kindness built this? He gestured at the cabin, the corral, the meager signs of a solitary life. Ioka stepped forward, her eyes blazing in the lantern light. And yet you are still alone. Perhaps it is because you see the world only in terms of what can be taken, never what can be given. The words cut sharper than a knife. The rancher's jaw flexed, but he did not strike back. Instead, his eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped into a growl. Careful, woman. Pride won't keep you warm tonight. The fire inside the cabin popped and hissed, sending sparks into the air. The sisters stood on the edge of a decision that felt like a cliff step forward, and they risked losing themselves. Step back, and they faced the deadly desert. Nalen's fear grew heavier with each breath. She touched her sister's hand, clutching it tightly. Ioka, I am so tired. I cannot face the cold again, not tonight. Her voice cracked, desperate, pleading. Ioka's heart ached. She looked at her younger sister, the girl she had sworn to protect since they were children. Every scar, every tear, every step they had taken through the wilderness had been for survival. And now, survival demanded a price she could hardly bear. The rancher seemed to sense their breaking point. He stepped back into the cabin, gesturing toward the warm glow within. My offer stands, he said simply. Stay as my wives tonight. At dawn, you walk free. His voice carried no malice, no pity, only the cold certainty of a man who believed the world bent to his will. The sisters stood at the threshold of fate, the desert winds howling behind them, the fire beckoning ahead. Ioka drew a long breath, her voice steady though her soul trembled. If we accept, she asked, will you swear upon your God and your land that you will release us come morning? The rancher's eyes met hers, unreadable in the dim glow. For the first time, something like respect flickered there. Slowly, he nodded. I give you my word. The sisters exchanged a look, fear, sorrow, and unspoken love between them. And with heavy hearts, they crossed the threshold into the cabin, stepping into a night that would test not just their bodies, but the very essence of who they were. Inside the cabin, the warmth wrapped around the sisters like a heavy blanket, almost suffocating after the bitter chill of the desert. The fire burned brightly in the stone hearth, throwing long shadows across the wooden walls. The smell of roasted venison lingered in the air, mingled with tobacco smoke and the faint scent of whiskey. The rancher closed the door behind them with a firm thud. The sound carried a finality that sent a shiver down Nalen's spine. He leaned his rifle against the wall and strode past them, moving with the ease of a man who owned everything within these four walls. Gesturing to a rough-hewn bench by the fire, the sisters obeyed, their bodies weary, their minds restless. Ioka sat tall, her face calm, though her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Nayland, younger and more fragile, curled in on herself, her eyes darting around the cabin as if searching for escape. The fire cracked and hissed, filling the silence. For a long while, none of them spoke. The rancher busied himself with a pot on the stove, ladling out stew into 2 tin bowls. He set them down on the table without ceremony. "Eat, you'll need strength," he said. The sisters exchanged a glance. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, yet the food felt like a chain, tying them to the bargain they had not fully accepted in their hearts. Still, survival demanded they eat. Slowly, they lifted the bowls and tasted the stew. The meat was rich, the broth hot, it filled the emptiness inside them, even as guilt and fear filled their souls. When the rancher finally sat across from them, his eyes lingered on their faces, studying every movement. "You come from far," he said. "I can tell by the dust on your feet. What chased you here?" Ioka's lips tightened. She had no desire to share the pain of her people with this man. "The desert," she answered simply. The rancher smirked, sipping from a tin cup of whiskey. "The desert don't chase. Men do." At that, Nayland lowered her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. Memories of fire, screams, and riders thundering through their village surged back. Ioka quickly reached for her sister's hand, squeezing it in comfort. The rancher leaned back in his chair, his gaze narrowing. "So you've lost something, family, tribe, that makes you desperate, and desperation, that makes you mine tonight." The words hung heavy, sharper than any blade. Nayland flinched, but Ioka held her ground, her voice calm, though her heart pounded. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but desperation also makes us dangerous. Do not mistake our silence for weakness." The rancher chuckled darkly, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. He rose and tossed another log into the fire, sparks flying upward. "You talk brave for a woman who came begging at my door." As the cabin settled into uneasy quiet, the sisters leaned toward each other, speaking in whispers the rancher could not hear. "We cannot stay," Nayland murmured, her voice trembling. "He will take more than he gives. I am afraid, Ioka." Ioka's hand stroked her sister's hair, soothing her like she had when they were children. "Listen to me," she whispered. "We endure this night, only this night. When dawn comes, we will leave this place behind." His word may be twisted, but ours will remain strong. No matter what happens, we walk away together. Nayland closed her eyes, drawing strength from her sister's promise. The firelight danced on their faces, illuminating both fear and unyielding love. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin walls. Inside, 3 souls sat in silence, 2 bound by blood and trust, 1 bound only by his own selfish hunger. The night had only begun, and with it, the true test of their spirits. That night, after the stew was eaten and the fire burned low, the cabin fell into uneasy stillness. The rancher sat in his chair, hat pulled low over his brow, drifting between wakefulness and sleep, the rifle still within his reach. The sisters lay side by side on a rough blanket near the fire, their backs pressed close together, whispering when the silence allowed. Nayland's eyes fluttered shut, exhaustion pulling her into dreams she could not escape. The warmth of the fire faded into memory, and she was carried back to the days before the desert swallowed their world. She was a child again, running barefoot along the riverbanks near their village. The water sparkled beneath the sun, cool and pure, while dragonflies skimmed across its surface. The laughter of children filled the air, mingling with the low songs of women grinding corn and the distant rhythm of drums. Her mother's voice rose above them all, steady and strong, teaching them the stories of their people. "Remember, Nayland," she would say, "the land is not ours to take. We belong to it, as do the eagle, the deer, and the river. As long as you honor the earth, it will never abandon you." The dream shifted. She saw her father, tall and broad-shouldered, teaching Ayoka to string a bow. His hands were strong, guiding, patient. "Your arrows must fly true," he told her, "not just into the heart of your prey, but into the truth of your spirit. Always let your heart guide your hand." Nayland smiled in her dream, remembering how clumsy her sister had been at first, losing arrows that thudded into tree trunks instead of targets. Yet Ayoka never gave up, never allowed herself to be beaten by failure. It was that same strength that now held them together in the desert's merciless grip. But as quickly as joy filled her heart, the dream darkened. Smoke rose on the horizon, shouts filled the air, and the thunder of horses shattered the peace. Raiders stormed their village, fire lighting the night sky red. Nayland heard her mother's screams, her father's cry of defiance, and then silence. She awoke with a sharp breath, her body trembling. The cabin walls returned around her, the smell of smoke and stew replacing the dream of ashes. Ayoka stirred beside her, immediately reaching to steady her. "What did you see, sister?" Ayoka whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Nayland's face. "The river," Nayland murmured. "Our home." Mother's voice. Father's hands. And then the fire. Her words broke, and tears slipped down her cheeks. Ayoka pressed her forehead to her sister's, her voice low and steady. "Dreams are echoes. They remind us of what was, not what must be. The fire took much from us, but it did not take us. As long as we walk together, the story of our family still lives." For a moment, the cabin's walls seemed to fade, and the sisters were children again, curled together beneath the stars, whispering promises into the night, promises of survival, of love, of never letting go. The rancher shifted in his chair, muttering something in his sleep, but the sisters did not hear him. Their world, in that moment, was their own, bound by memory, sustained by the dreams of the past. The fire crackled, soft and steady, as if it too remembered the stories of the land. The night grew heavy as the fire sank lower in the hearth. Shadows stretched long across the cabin walls, shifting and twisting with each flicker of flame. Outside, the desert wind moaned through the cracks, like voices of unseen spirits urging the sisters toward fate. The rancher stirred from his chair, straightening his broad shoulders. His eyes, sharp even through the haze of whiskey, settled on the two women curled by the fire. "It's late," he said, his tone flat, almost casual. "A deal's a deal. Time to hold your end." The words dropped like stones into silence. Nayland froze, her breath caught in her chest, while Ayoka's jaw tightened, her eyes hardening into steel. Ayoka rose slowly to her feet. "You promised us, Dawn," she said firmly. "We have not yet seen the sun." The rancher smirked, rising as well, towering above her. Dawn, night hit, don't matter. You're in my cabin now. You live because I let you. That's the truth of it. Naylin clutched the blanket tighter around herself, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would betray her fear. She whispered, Ioka, please. Ioka did not waver. She stepped closer to the rancher, her chin lifted in defiance. You gave your word. Where I come from, a man's word is his spirit. If you break it, you have nothing, not even yourself. The rancher's smirk faltered. For a heartbeat, he seemed caught between anger and shame. He was a man hardened by loneliness, by years of silence on the prairie, but some part of him still understood the weight of honor. Yet temptation burned hotter than pride. His hand twitched near the rifle, leaning against the wall. Honor don't keep a man warm, he muttered. The fire cracked loudly, breaking the tension. Naylin, trembling, whispered urgently, Ioka, if we defy him, he may kill us. The desert will kill us if he doesn't. What choice do we have? Her sister turned, her eyes fierce, but her voice gentle. We always have choice, Naylin. Even if the world takes everything, it cannot take the spirit unless we give it freely. Tears welled in Naylin's eyes. I am afraid. I want to live. Ioka's gaze softened. She cupped her sister's cheek, whispering so only she could hear. Then we will live. But we will do so as who we are not, as what he demands. The rancher's voice cut through the silence. Enough whispers. Decide. You stay as wives, or you leave my cabin now and freeze in the dark. The sisters looked at each other, their entire world compressed into that one glance: fear, love, and the weight of choice. Ioka saw her sister's exhaustion, the pain etched into her body. She saw the desperation that survival demanded. Finally, she turned back to the rancher. Her voice was steady, clear as the desert stars. We will stay till Donna's guests, not wives. If you break your word, then may the land itself turn against you. The rancher's face hardened, his eyes blazing. For a long, tense moment, it seemed violence would erupt. His hand hovered near the rifle, his breath heavy. Then, slowly, he lowered it. His jaw clenched, his pride stung. But something in Ioka's defiance pierced him deeper than any blade. He spat into the fire, the flames hissing at the insult. Fine guests, but you'll remember everything out here comes with a price. The sisters sank back onto the blanket, hearts pounding. They had chosen. The night would test them still, but their spirits remained their own. The fire had burned low, reduced now to glowing embers that pulsed like the heartbeat of the cabin. Shadows climbed the log walls, stretching and curling, alive in their silence. The desert outside moaned softly, as though the earth itself kept watch over the uneasy truce inside. Ioka lay awake, every sense sharpened. Her sister slept fitfully beside her, murmuring now and then as dreams twisted through her mind. The rancher sat across the room, half hidden in shadow, a bottle of whiskey cradled in his hand. He had not gone to bed, though his head dipped and rose, as if sleep wrestled with his stubborn will. Every time his eyes flicked open, they sought the sisters. Possession glimmered there, mingled with loneliness, anger, and something darker still. Ioka's hand drifted toward the small knife hidden in the folds of her blanket. It was all they had managed to keep from the rabbit's blade, short but sharp, a final piece of home. She prayed she would not need it, but in her heart she prepared. Hours passed, slow as a dying river. Then, with a grunt, the rancher rose. The floorboards creaked beneath his heavy boots as he crossed the room. Ioka tensed, her body coiled like a drawn bow. The rancher crouched near the fire, tossing in another log. Flames licked upward, brightening the cabin in a sudden burst. His face glowed in the light, eyes tired but restless. He turned, his gaze locking onto Ioka. "You think me a monster," he said suddenly, his voice low, rough. The words startled her. She said nothing, only watched him. He leaned back on his heels, staring into the fire. "You see only the bargain I offered, but you don't know what it is to live alone, to spend years with no voice but your own, no warmth but the fire, no touch but the wind. A man can lose himself in silence." Ioka's eyes softened slightly, though her guard never lowered. "Loneliness is no excuse for cruelty," she said quietly. The rancher's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "Maybe not, but it's all I have." For a moment, silence stretched again, broken only by the crackle of flame and Nalen's soft breathing. The rancher's shoulders sagged, his pride faltering in the glow of confession. Yet, just as quickly, hardness returned. He straightened, his voice rough once more. "Still, a man must take what's his, or this land takes him first." He moved closer, too close. Ioka's hand tightened around the knife beneath the blanket. Her heart pounded, but her face remained stone. "Stop," she whispered, her voice carrying a quiet warning. The rancher froze, his eyes narrowing. "Would you use that little blade on me?" Her fingers clenched tighter. "If I must." For a long breath, they stared at one another, the rancher caught between hunger and respect, the woman unbroken despite her fear. Finally, he let out a harsh laugh, stepping back. "You're fire itself," he muttered. "Touch you, and I'd burn." He sank back into his chair, taking another long swallow from the bottle. Before long, his head drooped, and the weight of whiskey pulled him into sleep. Ioka's chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. She had not moved, not even when her muscles screamed. Slowly, she let the knife slip from her grasp, hiding it again. Beside her, Nalen stirred, half awake. "Sister," she whispered. "Sleep," Ioka murmured, brushing her hair gently. "The night is almost done." But in her own heart, she wondered if dawn would truly bring freedom, only another shadow. The first pale light of dawn crept slowly across the desert, painting the horizon in strokes of rose and gold. Inside the cabin, the fire had died down to ash, and the air was heavy with the smell of smoke and stale whiskey. Ioka's eyes opened to the faint glow of morning. She had not slept much, watching the rancher all through the night. He now lay slumped in his chair, hat tipped over his brow, the whiskey bottle empty at his side. His chest rose and fell with the deep, uneven breaths of heavy sleep. Quietly, Ioka nudged her sister awake. "Nalen," she whispered, her voice soft but urgent. "The sun is here. It is time." Nalen stirred, blinking against the dim light that seeped through the cracks of the cabin walls. Her face was pale with fatigue, but her eyes glimmered with relief. "We survived," she murmured, almost not believing it. "Yes," Ioka said firmly, "and now we leave." The sisters rose silently, gathering their thin blankets. Every creak of the wooden floor felt like thunder. Every shift of breath from the rancher threatened to shatter their fragile chance. Ioka's hand never strayed far from the knife hidden at her side. They moved toward the door, the cold morning air already seeping through its edges. As Ioka reached for the latch, a voice rasped behind them. "Leaving so soon?" The rancher had stirred, his eyes half open, his voice thick with sleep. He sat forward in the chair, watching them with that same unreadable gaze. For a moment, fear froze them. Naylin clutched her sister's arm, trembling. But Ioka straightened, her voice steady. "The sun has risen," she said. "Your word was that at dawn we would be free." The rancher rubbed his jaw, studying them in silence. The firelight was gone now. Only the pale glow of morning lit his face. Without the shadows, he looked less like a predator and more like a man worn thin by years of solitude. He exhaled slowly. "So it has," he muttered. "And a man's word." He trailed off, then nodded once. "Go on then. The desert's waiting." Relief washed over Naylin, though her knees nearly buckled. She whispered a quiet prayer of thanks as Ioka opened the door. The sisters stepped out into the cool desert dawn. The air smelled of sage and dust, the sky stretching vast and endless above them. The horses stamped their hooves in the corral. Restless with the promise of day. For a long moment, Ioka stood still, feeling the earth beneath her feet, the sun on her face. This land, though harsh, was still their home. It had taken much, but it had not taken them. Naylin slipped her hand into her sister's, her voice soft but certain. "Where do we go now?" Ioka looked toward the rising sun, her eyes fierce with determination. "Forward. Always forward. We will find our people again, or we will make a new home. The land has not abandoned us yet, and neither shall we abandon each other." Behind them, the cabin stood silent, its smoke rising faintly into the morning sky. The rancher watched from the doorway, his figure small against the vast horizon. For the first time in many years, he felt something stir in his chestnut desire. Not anger, but a hollow ache for the humanity he had nearly lost. The sisters did not look back. Their steps carried them into the desert, two shadows against the light, their bond unbroken, their spirits unyielding. Dawn had given them destiny and they chose to walk it together.